The first thing I noticed was the front door standing slightly open. Not unlocked. Not broken. Just open enough for silence to spill into the hallway like something waiting for me. My heart started pounding before I even stepped inside. I had left for work before sunrise, exhausted after another double shift, and I knew I had locked that door behind me. In my neighborhood, a door left open usually meant only two things: someone desperate had entered, or someone dangerous was still inside. The grocery bag slipped from my hand as I pushed the door wider. Apples rolled across the floor. One bumped softly against a pair of expensive black heels standing near my kitchen counter. And then I saw her. My boss. Celeste Moreau, the coldest, richest, most untouchable woman I had ever met, was on her knees in my living room, scrubbing dried paint off my floor with a towel in her hand. For a moment, neither of us moved. Sunlight poured through the dusty curtains, catching the loose strands of her hair. Her white blouse was wrinkled. There was dirt on her sleeve. Her face looked nothing like the sharp, polished CEO who terrified everyone in the office. She looked human. Broken, almost. And when she looked up at me with tears in her eyes, I realized whatever reason had brought her into my house was about to change both our lives forever. Before we continue, if you believe kindness can appear in the most unexpected places, take a moment to like, comment, share, and subscribe to Lifeline Vibes. Stories like this remind us that second chances and compassion still exist in this world. The truth was, my life had been falling apart quietly for months. At 34, I was surviving more than living. After my wife passed away from a sudden illness 2 years earlier, everything became a blur of bills, grief, and responsibility. I worked as a financial analyst at Moreau Holdings during the day and drove deliveries at night just to keep my small house from slipping away. Sleep became a luxury I couldn't afford. Some mornings, I stared at myself in the mirror and barely recognized the hollow-eyed man staring back. The house itself carried too many memories. Every room still whispered my wife's laughter. The chipped blue mug near the sink. The half-finished flower garden outside. The height marks on the wall where we once dreamed about raising children together. I couldn't bring myself to erase any of it, even as the house slowly decayed around me. The ceiling leaked during storms. Paint peeled from the walls. Laundry piled up faster than I could wash it. Some nights I ate cereal straight from the box because I didn't have the energy to cook. But I never let anyone at work know. Especially not Celeste Moreau. She was known throughout the city as the Ice Queen of Madison Avenue. Billion-dollar deals. Ruthless decisions. Perfect suits. Perfect posture. Perfect control. Employees feared her more than they respected her. She rarely smiled. Rarely spoke unless necessary. And when she entered a room, conversations died instantly. The strange thing was, she noticed everything. She noticed when employees skipped lunch. She noticed trembling hands during presentations. She noticed tired eyes. Once, she corrected a typo in a 60-page report after glancing at it for less than 30 seconds. But compassion? Nobody associated that word with her. A week earlier, I had collapsed at work. Not dramatically. Not the kind of collapse you see in movies. My body simply stopped cooperating during a morning meeting. My vision blurred. My knees buckled. 1 second I was presenting quarterly projections, and the next I was waking up in the company medical room with embarrassment burning through me. Celeste had been standing nearby when it happened. The next morning, she called me into her office. I expected termination. Instead, she stared silently at the dark circles under my eyes before asking one strange question. "Are you living alone, Mr. Vale?" I remember freezing. Something about the question felt too personal. Too dangerous. I told her yes. She nodded once and dismissed me without explanation. Now she was standing in my living room holding a rag in one hand and looking like she had been crying for hours. "What are you doing here?" I whispered. Her lips parted, but no words came out immediately. She looked around my house as if seeing something painful. The cracked walls. The broken cabinet door. The stack of overdue notices near the table. Finally, she said quietly, "I didn't realize how bad things were. I should have been angry. Furious, even. A billionaire CEO had entered my home without permission. But somehow the anger never arrived. Maybe because she didn't look powerful anymore. She looked shattered. She explained that after I collapsed, she had asked human resources for my emergency contact information. They mentioned I had none. No family nearby. No spouse. No support system. Something about that unsettled her. Then yesterday, one of my coworkers mentioned I had been sleeping in my car during lunch breaks because I was too exhausted to drive home between shifts. For reasons she still couldn't fully explain, she drove past my neighborhood that morning. She saw my front yard overgrown with weeds and noticed rainwater leaking through part of the roof. She claimed she only intended to leave groceries at the door. But when she knocked, the door swung open because the lock was damaged and barely held anymore. And once she stepped inside, she couldn't walk away. I looked around the room again. The dishes were washed. The trash bags were gone. The dusty windows had been cleaned. Fresh groceries sat neatly on the kitchen counter. No one had taken care of me in a very long time. That realization hit harder than grief ever had. Celeste suddenly sat down in the chair beside the table and covered her face with both hands. Her shoulders trembled slightly. Then she said something I never expected to hear. "This house looks exactly like my father's house before he died." The room fell silent except for the ticking wall clock. She slowly began telling me a story no employee had ever heard. Before becoming one of the wealthiest women in the country, Celeste grew up poor in a tiny apartment with a single father who worked himself into the ground to provide for her. Her mother abandoned them when she was 6. Her father took every job he could find: construction, janitorial work, warehouse shifts. He smiled through exhaustion until one day his body simply gave out. She was 17 when she found him unconscious beside a sink full of dirty dishes. By the time the ambulance arrived, it was too late. Her voice cracked as she looked around my kitchen. "The dishes, the unopened bills, the exhaustion in your eyes," she whispered. "I saw him again when you collapsed at work. For the first time in years, I felt someone truly see me. Not my job title. Not my productivity. Not my failures. Me." The following weeks changed everything slowly, almost imperceptibly at first. Celeste began checking on me regularly at work. Not in a controlling way. Quietly. Humanly. Sometimes she'd leave coffee on my desk during long mornings. Sometimes she'd tell assistants to clear my schedule after late-night projects. Once, she personally approved paid leave for me after discovering I hadn't taken a vacation in nearly 3 years. Rumors spread instantly throughout the company. People whispered that I must know secrets about her. Others assumed there was some hidden scandal. But the truth was far simpler and far more emotional. 2 broken people had accidentally recognized themselves in each other. One Saturday morning, she arrived at my house wearing jeans and gardening gloves. Without explanation, she began pulling weeds from the yard my wife once loved. The sight nearly destroyed me. I hadn't touched that garden since the funeral. Seeing another person care for it felt almost unbearable. We spent the entire afternoon under warm daylight planting new flowers. For the first time in years, laughter returned to that house. Real laughter. The kind that sneaks up unexpectedly and leaves tears in your eyes afterward. Little by little, color returned to my life. I started sleeping properly. Eating properly. Living properly. And strangely, Celeste changed too. Employees noticed she smiled more often. She stopped humiliating workers during meetings. She created mental health support programs within the company. She even established paid caregiver leave after learning how many employees were silently drowning at home while pretending everything was fine at work. One evening, months later, we sat on my porch watching the sunset spill gold across the neighborhood. The repaired roof no longer leaked. The garden bloomed brighter than ever. Children rode bicycles down the street while warm summer wind carried the scent of fresh grass through the air. Celeste looked peaceful for the first time since I'd known her. Then she admitted something quietly. "I thought success would erase loneliness," she said. "But all it did was make it harder for people to notice I was hurting." I understood exactly what she meant. Pain wears expensive suits sometimes. And loneliness can exist even inside crowded boardrooms. The truth was, neither of us saved the other completely. Life doesn't work that way. Grief still visited me unexpectedly. She still carried scars from losing her father. But together, we reminded each other that healing becomes possible when someone chooses to stay instead of walking away. Months later, the company hosted its annual charity gala. Hundreds of wealthy investors filled the ballroom. Crystal chandeliers glittered overhead while cameras flashed non-stop. Near the end of the night, Celeste stepped onto the stage to deliver her speech. Everyone expected another corporate presentation. Instead, she told a story. Not my name. Not private details. Just the story of a man drowning silently while pretending to be fine because the world taught him exhaustion was strength. She spoke about grief, pride, isolation, and how easily people overlook suffering when someone keeps showing up to work on time. The entire ballroom fell silent. Then she said something I will never forget. Sometimes the strongest people are simply the ones no one bothered to help. There were tears in countless eyes that night, including mine. And standing there beneath those lights, I realized my life had changed forever the moment I opened that front door and found my boss cleaning my house. Not because she fixed my problems, but because she reminded me I was still worthy of care. If this story is touching your heart so far, please take a moment to like, share, and comment below. Your support helps Lifeline Vibes continue bringing emotional stories that remind people they are never truly alone. Months later, on the anniversary of my wife's passing, I visited her grave carrying fresh white lilies from the restored garden. Celeste came with me quietly, standing several steps behind while giving me space to grieve. As sunlight filtered through the trees, something inside me finally loosened after years of pain. Not disappeared, but softened. For the first time since losing my wife, I no longer felt trapped in survival mode. I felt alive enough to imagine a future again. Before ending this story, I want to ask you something special. Comment below with the words, "Kindness changes lives," if you believe one act of compassion can completely transform someone's world.